This Sunday, breakthrough in Egypt. Celebrations in the streets of Cairo as President Mubarak steps down from power after a 30-year reign.
The people of Egypt have spoken. Their voices have been heard, and Egypt will never be the same.
So what now and what's next in Egypt and around the Middle East? Is the revolution over? What will it mean for U.S. interests in this crucial region? Then the budget battle at home.
A lot of us freshmen don't have a whole lot of knowledge necessarily about the way that Washington, D.C. is operated. And frankly, we don't really care.
Freshman Republicans assert their new power, pushing their leaders for deeper spending cuts as the GOP prepares to battle the White House over the president's new budget coming out tomorrow. This morning, an exclusive conversation with the Republican Speaker of the House, John Boehner. Also this Sunday, the race for the White House 2012.
We need to win the triple crown of 2012, which is holding on to the House of Representatives, winning a conservative Senate, and oh yeah, baby, winning the White House in 2012. The triple crown.
Conservatives gather for the annual CPAC conference here in Washington, and some potential Republican presidential contenders make their debut and test the waters. Insights and analysis from our roundtable this morning. The mayor of Atlanta, Democrat Kasim Reed, freshman member of Congress supported by the Tea Party, Representative Bobby Schilling of Illinois. Former Clinton White House press secretary Dee Myers, columnist for the New York Times David Brooks, and Time Magazine's Mark Halperin.
From NBC News in Washington, Meet the Press with David Gregory.
We are back, joined now by our roundtable. Former Clinton White House press secretary Dee Myers, editor-at-large and senior political analyst for Time Magazine Mark Halperin, New York Times columnist David Brooks, and two newcomers to our roundtable. Both have focused their leadership efforts on the issue of spending. Tea Party-backed freshman member of Congress, Republican Bobby Schilling of Illinois, and first-term mayor of Atlanta, Democrat Kasim Reed, who the Grio.com has just named to their list of 100 history makers in the making, celebrating Black History Month this month. Welcome to all of you. Certainly a lot to get to. Good to have you here. David Brooks, on the subject of Egypt, fast-moving developments, and I thought it was striking, the Speaker of the House really behind President Obama and his leadership here, saying he's handled just about as well as he could have.
Yeah, more agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats than between the White House and the State Department, apparently. There was sort of an interesting fight all week. The president really wanting to be on the side of the street, the democracy protesters, the State Department wanting to be more slow transition. And I would say one of the big news, first, the State Department, I don't think Hillary Clinton handled this situation particularly well. I don't know what they were thinking, that Mubarak could lead a transition to democracy, that the street would accept a slow transition. I don't know what they were thinking. And secondly, I don't think the president really, I thought there were moments when he was superb, but didn't really control his administration fast enough and really had to struggle to control the State Department.
Mark Halperin, there is a danger here that as this movement spreads throughout the Middle East, this becomes a growing part of the president's leadership challenge here in terms of how much support the United States will provide for these movements around the world.
Well, there are questions that are begged overall about what its general posture is, and then country by country. And the balance between security and supporting democracy is going to be huge. We talked at the beginning of the show, talked about Iran. That's clearly where the administration would like to focus. There's a great best-case scenario here where this movement does spread in a way that brings more democracy and where these governments change to a more open society without a loss of stability. It's going to take a lot of the president's attention, no question.
Congressman Schilling, with fresh eyes on this, you're new to Congress, you're new to the foreign policy establishment debates. Here was a stalwart ally for 30 years in the Middle East, and poof, he is gone. And it's not really clear where things go now. What concerns you?
You know, my big concern is that however this gets resolved, it's in a peaceful fashion and that we still stand with Israel. I think that's the key.
Right, and you hear the Egyptian military saying today that all those international agreements will be kept, but this will certainly be a big issue in Congress, is making sure that whatever leadership takes over will honor that peace treaty.
That's exactly right.
I also want to turn to spending for both you and Mayor Reed, because that's the other big story, of course, this weekend, will be next week as well. It was interesting, Congressman Schilling, this was the quote in the State Journal-Register: as you were bound for Washington, you promised Schilling not Boehner's clone. And you and other Tea Party folks certainly lived up to that in the last couple of weeks, because you came in and said, hey, wait a minute, we made a promise about how much spending we were actually going to cut. We haven't lived up to it. Are you satisfied now or still upset about how the leadership handled it?
You know, I'm actually quite satisfied with them. I mean, the thing that's nice about the leadership is that they are giving us a voice. You know, they could say, you know, hey, look, you guys don't count. We're just going to run the way we want. And that's the thing I have noticed with the leadership. You know, here's the thing we've got to remember is that we've got 87 new freshmen here, and there's some major growing pains. So it's not going to be perfect, but we will strive towards perfection. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Mayor Reed, your issue as the mayor of Atlanta is one that local cities and states are dealing with all over the country, and that is you're strapped for cash. You gave a commencement address last December, and this is part of what you said, which was interesting, and it can become a national conversation. I believe the city, the state, and the country is making a big mistake in not asking more from us. When you look at where America is, the bottom line is that for the country to do and to be what we have been, certainly within the last 40 to 50 years, there must be a generation tough enough to stick out its chin and take it and get on with it. Do you think we're doing that as a country when it comes to how much the government should do, how much it can't do, the kind of debt we face?
No, I do not. And what we're trying to do in Atlanta is just to go on with our work and to set an example. What cities can do faster than the federal government in many instances to be an example and get on with your work. I do believe that we need to get on with an honest conversation, and we need to make hard decisions much faster, and I don't think we're doing that.
And you've done some of those decisions, like pension reform, which is something that states are dealing with all over the country, cities are dealing with across the country, which is they can't afford to keep all those promises.
We went in the first 6 months when I was an untested mayor in my first year, did as much as we could legally. We're going to go back into this budget cycle and do it again. And whether I'm mayor or not, when it's all said and done, is another matter. But
you might take it on the chin.
Oh, yeah, but I think I'm doing the right thing. I think I'm doing the right thing for the city, and I think we're going to try to be a model so that other governments can show that it can be done and that you can survive it.
Dee Myers, the spending fight that we're going to see in Washington, we're already seeing it over this year's spending for the rest of this fiscal year, but then the president's budget. As I asked the speaker, is this a collision course here as the president talks about winning the future? Or do you hear Speaker Boehner wanting to compromise more than perhaps the Tea Party will let him?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. I mean, there's two battles. There's the battle between Republicans and Democrats, and then there's the battle within the Republican caucus. And we saw some of that play out just this week. You know, Rep. Ryan produced a budget that cut $32 billion in spending.
This is the budget chair of the House Budget
This is the House, Congressman Ryan, also of Illinois, produced a budget that cut $32 billion for the rest of this fiscal year, and that wasn't enough. And other freshmen, like Congressman Schilling, came back and said that's not going to do it, and so now we're at almost twice that. What is going to happen going forward? How is this continuing resolution going to be resolved, and then how is the budget going to be resolved? The president didn't take on entitlements either. He's not. There are going to be no changes to entitlement spending in tomorrow's budget.
And that's significant. David Brooks, you fired a shot across the bow to the likes of Congressman Schilling this week. I'll put it up on the screen. This is what you wrote. Anybody who doesn't take on entitlement spending is an enabler of big government. The supposedly rabid Republican freshmen are actually big government conservatives. They will cut programs that do measurable good while doing little to solve our long-range fiscal crisis.
Yeah, what we're going to see this week is people like wrestling over the bed sheets on the Titanic. I mean, it's, as you alluded to, it's 60% of the budget. We're going to do all the fighting over that. The 84%, which is going to grow to 86% and 88% and 90% in the years ahead, which is Medicare, Social Security, interest on the debt, all that kind of stuff, veterans. Nobody's talking about that. And worse, nobody's even preparing the ground for that. So all around the country, you've got people like Mayor Reed willing to take the serious issues and get to the core of the problem. In Washington, I can think of maybe 10.
Right. Congressman, what do you say to that?
You know, I think that, you know, this is going to be done in phases, and I think that every American out there pretty much realizes that we have to go after the entitlement programs. I believe truly that everything is on the table across the board.
Spell out what you mean. Are you for raising the retirement age on Social Security?
You know, I don't know if that's going to be part of it. You know,
means testing benefits?
Here's the thing is, I mean, I'm a small business owner that got into this because I was sick and tired of watching the direction the country was going. It wasn't going the right way. And I mean, November the 2nd, there was a mandate across this great nation saying, we've had enough of this, what's going on? So, you know, do I know exactly where the cuts? I know as a small business owner, what I do is I troubleshoot in, I find the problem, I go in.
No, but Congressman, this is the real problem. If you're a Tea Party guy, you come in here and you say we got to really reduce government. I mean, we know what the issues are. We know what the choices are that have to be made. So on Social Security, you're either for raising the retirement age or cutting benefits or some combination of raising taxes. So what are you prepared to do? And if you're not prepared to do something, then how can you really claim leadership when it comes to reducing the scope of government?
You know, like I said, I think we need to have everything on the table, whether it's raising, I'm not going to say going to commit to raising the age of Social Security, but here's the thing is if we do nothing, we know it's broke. So, you know, we've got to put everything on the table and make good decisions. You know, if we continue the path we're going bankrupt.
Well, you know, yeah, Mark Mark Halpern, what I keep hearing from leaders is we have to have the adult conversation, and I keep saying we can have a juvenile conversation as long as you'll say what you're actually for, because nobody's actually saying what they're for here on the tough stuff.
With all due respect to Congressman, this is the problem right now. All we have to do, though, if this is going to happen this year, and I think it could, is to get to a deal that's too big to fail. A deal that has the kind of tax increases that the congressman, I'm sure, would say today he wouldn't accept, the kind of cuts to health care that the president today would say he would not accept. Somehow that deal has to come together. The events right now are just pregame skirmishes until the end of the year when I think the president and the leader in the Senate are going to have to make a deal if it's going to happen.
The good news is there are some people actually taking up the mantle. I mean, it's all on the table. There are cobwebs on the table because it's all been sitting there for year after year. And if you look at the people in the Senate, there are people like Dick Durbin, Mark Warner, Saxby Chambliss, Tom Coburn, Mike Crapo, others, bipartisan group of senators. Right now there are like 10 of them. They're getting serious, and they're taking some political arrows right now because there are Republicans willing to look at tax increases. There are some Democrats willing to look at Social Security reform, and they're actually out there. And you're beginning to see something really hopeful start there, but you've got to show the leaders in the House and in the White House a politically viable route. And you need outside.
Mayor Reed, on the one hand, you've cut pensions in terms of when they vest, but you're also lobbying the federal government for more money for the Port of Savannah. I mean, so, you know, how do you accomplish both?
Because I think that's consistent with investing for the future. By deepening the Port of Savannah, Georgia, we're going to create an economy and have the port ready for the Panama Canal ships that come in 2014. It's consistent with the president's message on infrastructure investment and job creation.
Well, how does it affect some of the cuts that will definitely come down the line? How are you going to feel that in the city of Atlanta?
Well, the president had an honest conversation with us more than 6 weeks ago, so we've already started winding down. So we know that those dollars aren't coming, and much like the Social Security conversation, we know now. See, I just like to be told. I know that we're going to modify Social Security with regard to our age, so just tell us, let leaders step up and know it. The president told us that federal funding and federal support was going to wind down, so we're already preparing for that in our upcoming budget. But that's where I think we need to be going. Tell us the truth, and then we'll get on with it.
We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back with this roundtable, we'll talk about the race to the White House 2012 and how the Republican field is shaping up. More with the group right after this.
When events shake our nation.
Is this a wake-up call in terms of thinking about security?
And transform our world.
You said that the Egyptian government was stable.
More people turn to the #1 Sunday public affairs show.
If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. We are back with more from our roundtable. We're talking about the big debates coming up over the budget and spending. Ultimately, Mark Halpern, this is heading into 2012, a gathering of conservatives here this weekend, the CPAC conference. This is how it turned out. Who was on the leaderboard for the second year straight? Representative Ron Paul, 30%. Mitt Romney was the only one who had double digits. But here is the wider view. These are activists who paid to show up to CPAC, so a little bit narrower. But the wider view shows this is a spread-out race. Mike Huckabee at 21%, and there's Tim Pawlenty at 3%. Why is it still so unclear what the Republicans are doing?
Because the Republican Party in several generations have not had, or several decades have not had, no clear frontrunner. Today, I think there are 3 slots. We'll see how it develops. We'll see who ends up running. I think Newt Gingrich has a slot. Mitt Romney has a slot. And there's an establishment alternative to Romney's slot. You saw some of those people at CPAC. I don't think the speech has changed much. We have to see, does some establishment figure step forward to try to take that mantle away from Mitt Romney? And those 3 slots are going to be joined by a lot of other people trying to claw their way into possibility of nominations.
And D.D. Myers, what's the dynamic here? I mean, a lot of people talk about 4 years ago, I think this week was when Senator Obama announced there was so much that was settled across the land that Democrats could really get themselves organized at the end of the Bush administration. Not so this time.
Among Democrats?
Among Republicans, I mean, but the comparison to Democrats.
Right. For I don't know, a couple of generations, the Republicans have always chosen the next in line as their nominee. And by traditional measures, that would be Mitt Romney this time. But clearly, something has changed. The Republican Party is no longer willing to just take the next guy in line. There's a lot more, I think partly as a result of the Tea Party movement, there's a lot more churning in the base of the party. There's a lot less obeisance to that hierarchy that's driven Republican politics for so long, and so it is wide open.
And Congressman Schilling, talk about the impact of the Tea Party on a primary process, because these folks who are looking at the presidency are understanding that part of these debates that play out in Congress will have an impact on how the primary process goes.
Yeah, you know, that's very true, and I think that I personally believe that we've seen phase one of phase two coming. I think 2012 is going to show another phase. But the thing that's really interesting about the taxed enough already party, because we can tend to kind of label them Tea Party, is that, you know, they're going to hold people accountable either side. And I was told, hey, you know what, if you go against the things we sent you there for, we're going to work just as hard to get you out. So I think we're going to see another phase come through, but it's just a matter of time. So. And
Mayor, as you look at Atlanta, and you look at the conversation across the country, it's what I asked Speaker Boehner. Unemployment, if they're lucky, can be around 8%, maybe a little bit less. Tough circumstances for the president to face re-election.
They are. I think if unemployment gets to 8%, I think the president is going to be fine. I think it'll be tough, but if it is,
what will the argument be?
Well, I think the argument will be that the decisions that he made, the tough decisions he made around the automobile industry, the financial services industry, actually worked and is moving the country in the right direction. And he's a good person, and you need to let him continue to follow through. The Republican Party is beginning to feel more like the Democratic Party in terms of the lack of organization, if you will, and the openness. So I'm actually enjoying it. This new
David Brooks, there are a couple of outliers that aren't mentioned, well, they're becoming mentioned with more frequency. We'll put them on the screen. Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida, of course, president's brother, and John Huntsman, who was the ambassador to China for President Obama, has stepped down. Looks like he may be looking at a run, and the White House paying particular attention to him.
Yeah, and Donald Trump announced he might throw his hair into the ring, so that would be a good thing. Listen, you know, there are a lot of people out there. I really think there are really only a very few plausibles, actually. Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana, who gave quite a good speech this week at CPAC. Mitt Romney, of course. John Thune, a very normal guy, serious guy, smart guy, pretty good-looking guy. And then Tim Pawlenty. And after that, I think it's all commentary. Jeb Bush would be a great candidate. He's got the Bush problem. Huntsman, hey, he served in the Obama administration. Chris Christie would be great. He said he's not running.
Well, but what is the theory of the case, Mark? Because ultimately, it's still going to be tough for the Republicans, isn't it, as they head into 2012?
Well, if you look at the Electoral College, it's not that tough. There's about 7 states they've got to take away from the president to win. If unemployment is high, and if they can make an argument that the president has not handled himself well, imagine if Egypt goes badly, imagine if unemployment's still high. It's doable, but the president will be formidable. He's a better politician today than any of the Republicans thinking of running. He's better known. He'll raise more money. He's the incumbent. He's a lot of advantages.
Dee Dee Myers, as former press secretary during the Clinton White House, you know about transitions there at the podium, and we saw one this week. The president came into the Oval Office, excuse me, not the Oval Office, he was there too, but he came into the press room. And when Robert Gibbs was leaving, this is what he said.
Obviously, Gibbs's departure is not the biggest one today.
That was a good line on the day that Hosni Mubarak stepped down on Friday. What does this transition mean as we now hand the reins over to Jay Carney, former Time magazine bureau chief and worked for Vice President Biden? What are the challenges here?
Well, I think the first 2 years were difficult with the press in many ways. I think Robert Gibbs did a great job in many ways, but he did 2 jobs. He was a senior advisor to the president as well as a press secretary and spokesman. And so a lot of days I think reporters were frustrated they didn't get their calls returned. I mean, you can never do enough for the press, as we all know.
Yes.
But yeah, that's right, exactly. Right. But I think it's an opportunity for the administration to reset a little bit, to kind of redefine the relationship with the press and to kind of start in a new direction.
You know, reporters are neither thin-skinned or too demanding.
No,
so I
never.
think if we put it that way, things are fine. All right, thanks to all of you. We will leave it there. That is all for today. We'll be back next week. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.